Hello and welcome to the Midweek Check-in. It's really good to see you. We're in the middle of a leisurely gaze at covenant. 4 weeks to look at the history of this God-created agreement so we can try to work out what it means for us today. God spoke to Abraham, making his intentions clear by utilising the ancient custom of cutting a covenant, chopping animals in half, laying them on the ground and processing through the middle was a convention that Abraham would have been well aware of. It was how you did things back in the day, especially if you wanted to show that you were very serious about keeping the agreement. God is very serious about keeping it. God chose to bind himself to mankind in a life or death treaty. He wanted to show Abraham and us that he really means it. Moving 500 years forward in time, we come to Moses and the liberated slaves coming out of Egypt into the wilderness and camping in front of the mountain of God. They were instructed to prepare for 3 days before God gave the 10 Commandments. This time, the covenant was for a nation rather than just with Abraham. It took the form of vertical instructions and horizontal ones. How to behave before God and how to behave in a social context. Here they are, 4 vertical, 6 horizontal. After delivering these to the people, Moses went back up the mountain, and within days the people were petitioning Aaron to make an idol. When the people realized that Moses was taking forever in coming down off the mountain, they rallied around Aaron and said, "Do something. Make gods for us who will lead us. That Moses, the man who got us out of Egypt, who knows what's happened to him?" Here's the thing. When you read scripture, always be aware that God is speaking to you about you. If we have the bravery and humility to listen, and that's what the Midweek Check-in is all about, we read here an account of human nature. We want to worship God. The Israelites had said as much to Moses only days earlier. We're desperate to worship, but we also want to be in control. God created us and he knows us better than we know ourselves, which is why the first 2 commandments point away from ourselves and towards God. Have no other gods but me. Have no idols. History tells us we aren't very good at keeping covenant. Our conscience also informs us that we struggle, every one of us, to keep our side of the agreement. It's the transition from old covenant to new that we have a hard time with. We know the words, Ephesians 2. "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this not from yourselves, it's the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." The covenant is still about law, but it comes through grace. The purpose of this historical sweep through time is to highlight human nature and to press on our own nature to see what accepting grace for ourselves really means. If we're saved by grace, we also extend that same grace to others. Allow me to elucidate. The transition from law to grace is outlined even in the Old Testament. Here's God speaking through Jeremiah. That's right. The time is coming when I will make a brand new covenant with Israel and Judah. It won't be a repeat of the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took their hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. They broke that covenant even though I did my part as their master. God's decree. This is the brand new covenant that I will make with Israel when the time comes. I will put my law within them, write it on their hearts, and be their God, and they will be my people. They will no longer go around setting up schools to teach each other about God. They'll know me firsthand, the dull and the bright, the smart and the slow. I'll wipe the slate clean for each of them. I'll forget they ever sinned. God's decree. I'll forget they ever sinned. It's grace. Setting up schools is, of course, the insistence and perpetuation of the old law. The key to all of this is that the law is written on our hearts. It's not an external system to get right. It's allowing God to move in us so that we want to be right. We want to be like him. The law works from the outside in. Grace, the law written on our hearts, works from the inside out. The law forces you to be good. Grace enables you to want goodness. Let's talk about justice. There's retributive justice and restorative justice. We only know retributive justice. It's what our legal system's built on. We grew up with a sense of fairness. If you had brothers or sisters, you knew straight away when there was an injustice. If your brother or sister was treated better than you wanted to shout out, "It's not fair!" Our legal system is retributive justice. People who are put in prison have their liberty taken away, but how does that help the victim? Victims of crime still feel violated. Victims of physical or mental abuse are still injured. It's the system we all know, but it's not set up to do anything for the criminal or the victim. This sort of justice does nothing to address the causes of crime. This sort of justice does nothing to address the injury to the individual. Restorative justice seeks to heal and repair. Parents love their children unconditionally. Parents know that small children cannot earn or merit their love, so they choose to love because they want to. Grace is unconditional love. Retributive justice is the law. Restorative justice is grace. Are there any broken relationships in your life? Not just those where communication has ceased, but also those better relationships that still harbour unforgiveness. We are Christians. We live in the covenant with God that expresses itself through restorative justice, not retributive justice. Grace has been granted to me. I have to extend that grace to others. Let me say that in a different way. If I don't forgive others, I refuse God's grace. How does Jesus instruct us to pray? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. God never withholds his grace, but we can refuse to accept it. Refusing to forgive is refusing God's grace. We live in a world that practices retributive justice. We can't change that, but God does expect me to live exercising restorative justice to everyone I come into contact with. That's kingdom of heaven right there. That's your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. What are you waiting for? Let's create heaven on earth. Remember you're saved by grace so that you can extend grace to others. Thanks for listening. Thanks for showing a willingness to bring heaven to earth. Have a great week. Be blessed and stay safe.